You ready for the Florida State recruiting rundown? I'm ready. You better be ready too. Let's go.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome once again. I am Brian Smith, your host of Locked On Seminoles. Today's show is going to feature first two segments with recruiting. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what Norvell said after practice. So let's get down to it. This is kind of the fun stuff. We're down to the end of the recruiting cycle with the last group of kids, and they're starting the 25 cycle. That's going to be just two big segments all into conjunction. I'll break it up and have a little break, but it's basically two segments in one, basically. That's what it comes down to. Then we'll talk some Norvell. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, notification bell, like this podcast, share it, and please comment. So today, again, Florida State recruiting. I'm going to start mostly with class of 24 current seniors. Talked a little bit about LJ McCray yesterday. If you haven't seen that podcast, it goes into the potential of disinformation, if you will, about the recruiting world. And since I'm in it, I'm pretty sure on that, but check that out. If you haven't seen it already, there's reason I put that in there. He's announcing here pretty soon. We're going to talk about several kids, Jeremiah Smith. We're going to talk about Josiah Trader. We're going to talk about Armondo Blount, whole bunch of different kids, whether they're committed to Florida State, not committed to another school. Florida State is going after them, all the above, as they like to say. So it's going to be a fun podcast. Prize Picks is sponsoring this first segment. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Yeah, this is fun for me. It's one of the reasons I keep coming back to recruiting. I know it's a popular topic anyway, but this is the cusp right here at the end of October, and it'll really pick up about 3 weeks from now. Once we get into around the 10th or so of November, all these kids that are still on the board in some way, shape, or form, whether they're committed, uncommitted, halfway in or not with some school, Florida State included, have to kind of make up their mind. Signing day is December 20th. Need to kind of narrow it down, right? You got to figure that out. So I'm going to go over a handful of kids, some different things that I've heard from talking to other people, from kids that I've seen, a little bit of evaluation. It is flat out a whole bunch of kids in a rundown. So let's just start with this. I mentioned a little while back when I went to see Luke Cromahawk, all my thoughts about him, and you can search through and find his podcast. I have a highlight reel for him. It's a little over a minute, and then or about a minute, and then there's also just a full segment talking about Luke's game, how he impacts Florida State and some other great quarterbacks. But he also has given me over time, because I know him pretty well, some kids that they were recruiting, they wanted to flip or they wanted to get, etc. And he's been accurate just based on all the interviews that go on or not, whether it's me or somebody else that interviews a kid. He's pretty dialed in, which is good because he is a future quarterback for the Noles. The kids that he had told me a few months back, I'm guessing this is May, June, something like that, that he thought Florida State was really in on and wanted to get Josiah Trader, Jeremiah Smith. I mean, these aren't shocking names because they're elite players. But he kind of told me at a point like, hey, we got a shot here with some of these guys. And at the point that I had spoken to him, and again, I don't remember the exact date, it was summer, I didn't really know how accurate that was, because a lot of times, and quite commonly, honestly, college coaches will tell a kid that's committed, hey, we really got a shot at this kid. Help us get this kid, when their chances are 5%. College coaches think they're getting everybody. That's just the nature of the beast. I don't care what staff I talk to. They always think they're getting everybody. Well, predominantly. And anyway, they've been on the money. They've been right in the thick with the kids that Luke told me about. So that's a good sign. Florida State staff is realistic, because you're going to miss more in recruiting than you don't. I mean, you offer 150 kids and you sign 20 to 30. I mean, the math's pretty bad, but that's the way recruiting is because it's so competitive. So Cromahawk talked about Jeremiah Smith and Josiah Trader. So I'm just going to talk about them real quick, kind of give an overview of what I've heard recently, etc., and go from there. Let's start with Trader. That's a kid that Chromehawk personally would love to see end up in Tallahassee. He plays same school as Jeremiah. They're good buddies. They play at Chaminade Madonna in South Florida. Both are wide receivers. Trader is technically committed to Miami. I thought at one point, and so did several other people, thought that he was trending towards being a Nole. For whatever reason, and it was random, my buddy sends me a text and says, hey, Josiah just texted me. He's committing to Miami. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know he was deciding, let alone picking that school. It was kind of random, to say the least. And he said, well, I told him when he was going to commit to text me. And I said, well, that's nice. And he committed like 5 minutes later. Like there was just nothing, just boom, here it is. Anyway, I don't think that one is over. And I just going on what Luke had told me, and I have no reason not to believe it. I would not be surprised if he visited again. I have not spoken to Josiah recently. I will see him in early November. Chaminade comes up to Lakewood High School in St. Pete. I'll go over there. Makes it easy for me. And I'll check out that game, and then we'll see. I may get something out of him that night. I may not, but that's my guess. If it's not Florida State, I think he sticks with Miami, just based on intel that I've had. And Jeremiah has been very open with me too. But Josiah originally was a little harder between the two. But as it kind of got closer, we thought it was Miami or Florida State. And the 2 or 3 people I talked to all thought Florida State. Some around Chaminade and some outside of Chaminade. So who knows? But just kind of keep that one on the back burner and in your head. 2, Jeremiah Smith. I have not heard anything else new recently. I have not spoken to Jeremiah. I haven't been to a Chaminade practice or a game in a while because I've seen him so many times that I just kind of left it alone. But at the same time, I know he's the number 1 player in the country, at least in my book, and Florida State is going to recruit him until they can't recruit him anymore. He's supposed to be back up, and I assume it's going to be this weekend, but he's the kind of kid that can make his decision whenever he wants. Everything's going to be on his timetable, so I don't care if he is or is not on a list right now. I haven't even looked. I haven't asked. I haven't spoken to anybody at Chaminade. That's a kid that I know Florida State expected at least one time in the month of October. Flat out, not maybe, not could be, flat out, at least once, if not twice. So we'll see. If he comes up more than once, that's a good sign for the Noles. Still committed to Ohio State, but if he doesn't go there, it'll be in-state. I have no idea what he's got going on right now in terms of visits. Again, he kind of makes his own mind up. And travel, I mean, from Florida State to South Florida is not easy. That's a long way for those of you who haven't done that. Trip is not fun. So they got to kind of plan for that too. The next kid I want to talk about is somebody, I'm just going to keep it in the receiver notebook. And it's a kid that's committed to Florida State. And the reason I'm bringing him up, nobody ever talks about him. And he's really good. And his dad happens to be a legacy. That is Frier. He's at Lake City, Columbia. He is really good. Florida State, as I've said many times on this podcast, does their own thing. Now, again, his dad played for the Noles, so it's a little easier to find this kid. But Frier, Camden's he's yoked up, 190, 200 pounds, but he's a slot guy that's crafty, but he's also got speed. And if you're next to him, he's got the physicality to beat up on somebody. He built like a kid that you would think is a strong safety star kind of position on defense. And he's also capable of just being a natural receiver, a big running back, but he's a pass catcher. This is a kid that's going to be singled up because of all the talent Florida State's brought in. I mean, like Hakeem Williams, just as an example. Vandrevius Jacobs, kids like that are just getting started at Florida State. He's going to be thrown into that mix with them. You can't double team everybody. And I'm telling you, this kid understands routes. He understands how to get open. He is very crafty, and he's strong, and he's fast. He's all of that. But because he plays in North Florida, he doesn't get any attention. The difference in media attention where he's at compared to where I live is the difference between night and day. Just remember that Camden Frier can play some ball. Another kid that is kind of fun to talk about, and I don't think a lot of people realize just how important it is to get guys in your own backyard. It's another kid that's committed to Miami. We're going to switch to defense. Artavius Jones. He's at Blountstown. That's give or take 40 minutes or so from the edge of Tallahassee. Small town just southwest of the city of Tallahassee. And I'd seen him earlier this year. He's supposed to come back up, I think, this weekend. I get my dates mixed up from talking to people. I think it's this weekend, but he lives close enough. Again, he's kind of like Jeremiah. He can come whenever he wants because he's really good. But 310-pound defensive tackles in your backyard. Florida State missed first round, but they're still recruiting him, and you can just never have enough defensive tackles anyway. If he keeps coming back, you'd have to think there's a chance that he would flip. But at the same time, I haven't talked to him in a few weeks. I just want to reiterate more about him as a player right now. This is a kid that has the raw tools to be a first-round pick, but he's played 1A football in Blountstown. I'm like that. I was literally, according to their coach, the only guy that had been by to see him, and that was early in the fall. I'm not shocked, but I'm surprised at least one of the people from the Tallahassee Democrat or something like that hadn't seen him, because I live in Central Florida. I went up and just kind of went through and saw some different people, but that was interesting to me. And he's a really good football player. If Florida State wants to make this run longer than a year or two, he's the kind of kid they have to keep at home. In the last 5 to 7 years, Florida State has been terrible about keeping kids at home in the greater Tallahassee area. It's just true. There are kids starting at Alabama, Georgia, different places that are within an hour of Tallahassee in the state of Florida. When Bowden was there, they rarely lost this. Every now and then they would, but 4 out of 5 ended up being a Nole. And that's the reason they won. Yeah, they recruited some nationally, got an LA kid or a DC kid or something like that. I get it. Home base, Bowden and the Noles won. That's not going to change in terms of philosophy. And now Norvell, that they've started winning on the field, it's a little bit easier. Pay attention to Artavius Jones. That's a very important recruitment for Florida State. And if you get him, you take one away from the rival in Miami. Sticking on defense, but moving to class of 25. This is a kid that I love his film, another small school, but he's right down the street. Ironically, he's talking about staying home. He's maybe 30 minutes from Gainesville. Obviously, that's University of Florida's home city. Jarquez Carter plays at Newberry High School, class of 25. Again, I can't remember if it's this weekend or coming up. I think it's this weekend. He's supposed to be in Tallahassee. This is the kind of kid that Florida is famous for. D-tackle, get up the field, cause havoc, penetrate, make something go wrong for the offense. Not a huge guy, 6'2", 6'3", but extremely athletic. Penn State, Notre Dame, Miami, Florida, Florida State, you name it. He's already got all the offers, and he's not done with his junior year. And he's at a small school. He's at a small program. It's a great story, and it's one of the reasons I enjoy it in terms of a recruiting background. They have a lot of kids there that are just really good in this state coming from some of these small schools. Let's take a quick break with our first sponsor of the show. We're going to go with Prize Picks. This is the new thing that I've kind of gotten into, to be honest with you, and I hope you do as well. What is Prize Picks? It is your best bet for daily fantasy sports. So instead of going up against a bunch of people that sit around and on a computer and a spreadsheet, if you're going to try to wager or something like that on some other app, whatever one it may be, this is just you picking a handful of teams, or players, 2 to 6 of them, and it's over-unders, basically. So let's use Patrick Mahomes. Over-under 2 touchdowns. Over-under on points scored. Over-under on rushing yards. Whatever it may be. For Florida State, over-under on Jordan Travis throwing 250 passing yards, something of that nature. And you just do it 2 to 6 players, and you can make it how you want it to be, who you are comfortable with. So a couple of things about it. It's easy to download the app, easy to navigate the app, and it's kind of fun just to be creative and be yourself and not be forced into a situation or be pigeonholed, if you will, with what you're going to do. It's up to you. Prize Picks is your daily fantasy sports option that's going to be creative. So make it real simple for you. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. All right. Now, second segment. Let's talk a little bit more recruiting before we get into the Mike Norvell stuff, because I could talk recruiting forever. I could make 6 segments out of this if I wanted. There's a kid coming this weekend. I'm almost certain it's this weekend, named Gaston. What's been Florida State's biggest Achilles heel over, say, the last 6 years? It's obvious, right? It's offensive line. A buddy of mine told me this was Georgia's number one guy on the board, more or less. It was early at the time. This was before the season started for the class of 25 inside the state of Georgia, which is unbelievable for O-line. And 25 is a banner year in the state of Georgia, which is ridiculous because every year is good there. Name's Juan Gaston, plays at Westlake. That's the same high school. Clemson hits that school hard. Cam Newton came from there, etc. It's always got dudes. It's a program that Florida State's recruited forever as well. This program is so loaded, sometimes some of the underclassmen get a little bit overlooked, but Georgia made like an early offer when he was in 8th or 9th grade. He's 6'6", 330 plus pounds, can play left tackle, right tackle. This is the kind of guy that Florida State has not gotten, at least often, without the help from the transfer portal. If Florida State is truly going to be an upper echelon program, this is where Bama, Georgia, Michigan, and several programs have made hay. They might take a portal kid, but 95% of their O-line are homegrown out of the high school ranks. Slow to develop O-linemen. That's the history of college football. That's not changing. O-line is very difficult. It is technique. Rep. Same guys coaching, same system is the best thing to go. So if Florida State could get this kid, who's obviously a priority for Georgia, if you're offering him as a freshman, that's the kind of guy that you need. I look at this as a bellwether, a trendsetter, however you want to say it. Stealing kids out of Georgia is one thing, especially that central South Georgia area. Florida State's done that forever. Atlanta kids is another. That's why I thought the whole situation with KJ Bolden was so special. It's hard to get kids out of Buford to go to FSU over Georgia. Super hard. Congrats to Norvell and his staff. This would be an even bigger shot across the bow because it's an offensive lineman. This is the area that Kirby Smart takes very seriously. They kick the crap out of most people in O-line recruiting. It's just true. They're one of the few teams that can consistently run the ball against like LSU, against Alabama, and other teams in a big matchup. They're very rare about that. However, Florida State has started to make noise on the field. Obviously, the running game's much better. There's more protection for Travis. This is a kid we need to pay attention to, Juan Gaston. All right. There's one more kid I want to talk about, and it's a class of 25. And this is something that I'd mentioned a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I did the podcast. I can't remember. Talked about Florida State. They got a 2026 commitment. Really good player. And it's been a trend when Florida State has been up, Bowden era, or even recently under Jimbo, that they had a leading player on the roster from a Miami Central, American Heritage, something like that. Right now, like Conrad Hussey is somebody that Norvell talks about quite a bit. He's a freshman from St. Thomas Aquinas. If Florida State is going to win big, again, here's another bellwether situation. Got to get some South Florida kids. Armondo Blount committed to Miami. Committed. But does that mean that's where he's going? I had heard Florida State and Miami were pretty close, and he'd even told me to my face, this was right after the first game of the year, hey, man, just so you know, I'm not really looking or worried about recruiting that much right now. And he shouldn't have been, to be honest, because he just started getting all the texts and all that, because in August, NCAA allowed class of 25 kids to get direct messages and all that on their phones via text and phone calls and all that. But then he did commit to Miami. He went on a couple visits or whatever. He lives right down the road, and he committed. But I'm telling you that Florida State, and I'm sure many others, are still involved. This is another really important bellwether. Think of it this way. There have been numerous players that have come to Florida State, whether it's Central or otherwise, from the Miami Public League. Lamont Green, Marvin Jones, Snoop Menace, numerous players over there. And I'm missing 40 of them that are key players, I'm sure. But the point is still the same. It doesn't have to be a lot of them. It's about the quality. Armondo Blount is conservatively a top 20 player in the nation in the class of 25, probably top 10. He could even end up being number one, depends on how he develops. 250, 6'3" or so, maybe 6'4". Natural pass rusher, could play either end spot. And on third down and long, you can put him at 3 tech and give a guard complete havoc. Those are the rarest of the rare. Not one position, not two, but 3. He has those kind of physical traits. That is as scarce as it gets. Florida State, Norvell, and quite frankly, the rest of the free world, Saban, Kirby Smart, LSU, you name it, they're all going to come after him. Florida State is still involved here. Just kind of wanted to make that a mention, keep that alive. Speaking of a mention, College Football Live on Locked On YouTube. Fridays, 11 a.m. You can catch it on all the YouTube channels, including right here on Locked On Seminoles. If you cannot make the show live, you can check it after it's been downloaded. I'm going to talk about all the big games like Duke, Florida State, etc. And they're going to talk about the games across college football spectrum, injury updates, key highlights for what's coming up for the game, specific matchups within a game, any other breaking news, coaching changes, etc. There's going to be some of those coming up here pretty soon, I'm sure. All of that is going to be on Locked On College Football Live every Friday at 11. So with that being said, we'll get ready to segment into segment 3. Going to talk a little bit about what Norvell said after practice. Again, he was pretty positive, and I was very happy. Got a couple of keynotes that I wrote down. There were quotes that I thought were fantastic. That's up in segment number 3. All right. The J's case. The J's case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. So, for example, if you have somebody in your family, it's a kid, it's your mother, whatever it may be, somebody that has an allergy, something like that, you can talk to somebody with JCE Medical, find the need that fits you and or your family, and make sure you customize it the way that you prefer to do it. And if you don't know exactly what they might need and you would like to help them out, there's something cool they've come up with. This is pretty smart. You can get a gift card. So if you don't know exactly what they would like or something that you may not be sure about, you can speak with JCE Medical. Just go with the easy route and get a gift card. Let the person in question make that decision. So go to jcemedical.com and enter code Locked On at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code Locked On at jasemedical.com. All right. The final segment here, we're going to talk a little Norvell. And this is becoming a fun thing for me because he's one of the few coaches in college football that is pretty positive at press conferences. And by this point in the year, many coaches are really done dealing with the media. And I get it, but he's pretty positive. So the first thing he kind of demonstrated in the conversation, you can't really hear what all the reporters are saying, but I just watched the copy. And he talked about consistency and push over and over, and that he was happy with the effort. This is important on numerous levels. Number one, you just want to have good practice. But after you kick the bejesus out of somebody and 41-3 over Syracuse certainly qualifies, you never know what you're going to get. I don't care if it's a championship level team, a mid-level team, etc. After you win by 38, it's iffy. So that was good to hear. The other part of that is this is a team that's still hungry. When you're in the championship hunt for a conference, for the playoffs, national title, whatever, you don't know. Saban talked about last week they'd had a crappy week of practice. Well, guess what? They played crappy on the field. There's not a better motivator than Saban probably at the college level over the last 50 years. He's about as good as it gets. So I take what they say at practice when they run it really positive like that. When they give praise, they must really mean it because they're always trying to motivate every coach, not just Mike Norvell or Nick Saban. So that's a very good sign. Number 2, somebody asked a great question. Norvell is known as an offensive mind. Not any secret, but Mike Elko for Duke, the head coach, he's been a defense coordinator at Wake, Notre Dame, and A&M. Now he's the head coach at Duke. He's still a defensive-minded guy, and they don't have the same kind of talent level. They got ridiculous academic standards there. They can't get in the same kind of kids Florida State and state schools do. Yet at the same time, he's got this top defense, and they're scheming people pretty good. Hey, man, what's it like going up against a guy on the other side of the ball from what you really coach? He's like best on best. And, he embraced it. That's cool. Because not every head coach would take that. Like some guys would kind of, Mike's just a good coach, blah, blah, blah. Norvell embraced it. He's just real. And I wish more guys would. Matter of fact, the exact quote is, "It's a battle." And he just had like a smile on his face. That's legit, man. I wish more coaches would be like Norvell in that regard. It is a battle. X's and O's in football is hard. He talked about sometimes you call your best play, and they did too. And then it's just about the execution. That's what coaches live for, because did their practice plan, did how they go through drills, individual, skeleton, all the whole nine, did it prepare them to win those battles when it's good on good? That's why we watch, man. That's why we watch. And it's a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's a lot of fun for you. Or why are you here? Because this is Florida State football, and it's supposed to be fun. Last thing, somebody asked him about being at Florida State and all that kind of stuff, and he had a really interesting thought process on it. His basic quote, and anybody can take this whatever direction they want. And this is what I'm going to end on today. This is a special place, and football matters. Florida State has a very unique history in the college football landscape. Yeah, it's not one of the traditional blue bloods. That's not it's indisputable. It wasn't even around with some of the schools that really got it going. You know, like when Rutgers was playing against Princeton, and that first game was 1869 or whatever it was. You know, that's not the way this worked. But at the same time, they may not be Michigan, they may not be Penn State or some of the other schools or Alabama. But in the last 50 years, Florida State's about as relevant a program as there's been, and the development of this program has been incredible. They went from just a school that Bobby Bowden eventually admitted that when he first took the job, his goal was to get to Tennessee, Auburn, or Alabama. Then once he got it going, he's like, heck, I don't need to go there. I'm just going to stay right here in Tallahassee. That's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool, because Florida State, the upside at that program is always going to be high if the right people in the administration are on the same page with the head coach. Obviously, with Jimbo, they were not on the same page, and that's being kind, and that's why he split. Everything's kosher right now, and I think Florida State is in position long-term to make a really serious run. So it's cool to hear him say, again, this is a special place, and football matters. Florida State fans should be very, very happy about that, because that gives you a hint as to the long-term future of the Florida State Seminoles football program. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. Everybody, please like this podcast. Please share it. Please hit that notification bell. Give a thumbs up and comment. Let me know what you think. And if you got anything you want to talk about, let's do it. Take care, everybody.